Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
I'm very compassionate to what's happening upstate. And I'm very compassionate to what's happening downstate.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we're going to be looking back at the 2018 legislative session with our guest, Assemblymember Mosley, who represents the 57th Assembly District in Brooklyn. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get into looking back at the 2018 session, I want to talk about some things that are going on in your district.
Right.
First of all, you have some summer hours and Saturday office hours coming up, which is very important for your constituents, so they have an opportunity to connect with you and and just kind of get updated on what's happening.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, similar to like our Walk with Walter Wednesdays, this is something that we've been doing since I got elected. It's something my predecessor did, and something that we just felt was a great idea to kind of expand upon and change up the locations from year to year, so people can get used to us being in different locations. But at the same time, we have people who work who don't have time to take off from work to go into my office to file a complaint or issue a constituent service. So we actually just set up an office outside, and regardless of the weather, regardless if it's wet, raining or not, regardless if it's the temperatures are in the 90s, we have the facilities and apparatus to protect us from the natural elements. And we take in hundreds of issues and complaints. And, I think the constituents are appreciative of that, particularly on the weekends when people are more available and their schedule is not as tight for time. So, we always look forward to it, and it's a service that we're proud to provide.
And if anybody wants to get more information, they can obviously call your office.
Yeah, 718-596-0100, and they can speak to anyone in the office.
And another event coming up is this basketball camp, the Nike annual basketball camp at St. Joseph's College. It's July 16th through the 19th.
Yeah, great partners. Nike, a national recognized brand, and obviously St. Joseph's College has been a cornerstone of the 57th Assembly District for decades. To combine those two with St. Joseph's just having built their new basketball facility, and Nike coming in as one of the camp providers. And we have a number of camps all throughout and tournaments all throughout the district, and Nike being one of the main sponsors of several of these camps and tournaments. So we're very fortunate to have such a reputable brand to be proliferated throughout the district, because when people see that, they know it's a legitimate tournament or legitimate activity for their son or daughter to participate in, and we look forward to it. And we give out some scholarships for kids who might not be able to afford to go on their own. So that also serves as a twofer for us: the recognition, the affiliation, but at the same time, the giving back to the community.
And why is it so important for kids to have these sorts of programs over the summer?
Well, obviously we want to keep them busy. Kids have a lot of free time, a lot of disposable hours, to get into a whole lot of things, and we want to make sure whatever they get into that is positive and is constructive and it's not negative, and it doesn't put them in precarious positions where they might be exposed to any form of harm or danger.
Now let's take a look back at the 2018 legislative session. So first of all, some of the accomplishments. Housing. Some housing bills passed late in session. Can you tell us about those and what effect they'll have on your constituents?
Well, two particular housing initiatives. One dealing with individual apartment improvements, whereby we have put strict parameters where landlords can increase one's rent because of individual apartment improvement that they've kind of incurred in making these changes to a particular unit. And it not only caps it, it sets parameters by which a landlord must prove that these improvements were made, as well as it gives a certain time deadline. It's not in perpetuity that these increases to your rent remain in place. So a lot of times what we see in our district and throughout the city and the state, people make improvements. One, they maybe not be the right improvements. 2, they might be unjustifiable improvements. Or 3, they're improvements that are subpar or substandard. And as a result, maybe an artificial or inflated price is affiliated with those improvements, which then stays on your rent roll in perpetuity. So what we've done, we've kind of standardized this practice, making it a lot more transparent and open, while at the same time fair and something that we believe will help tenants be able to stay where they're living presently. And the second piece of legislation, which although we did not get it passed through the Assembly, but we did take another step in terms of adding more attention to it, was the anti-discrimination bill for multiple source income tenants who unfortunately throughout our state are looked at in a different light when you're talking about people who have multiple sources of income, who tend to be frowned upon by landlords, because landlords want to know where you're actually being paid, what salaries you're making. And a lot of times there are people who are working multiple jobs. Maybe they're getting some type of public assistance in some form or fashion. Usually these individuals who are single-headed households are usually women. So again, we see like this feminization of poverty, and this is an example by which women are looked at maybe in an unfavorable light disproportionately. Not to say it doesn't happen to men, but disproportionately it happens to women, where they're discriminated against because they're getting their income, maybe from divorce settlement, or maybe they're getting it from through a voucher, or maybe they're getting it through public assistance, and in addition to maybe a job or two. And what we don't want to do, we don't want to make it an arduous task to prove that you have legitimate income, but then on top of proving it, understanding that I shouldn't be discriminated against because I'm getting it from more than 1 or 2 sources.
Now, there was also grand jury reform, which passed in the Assembly.
Yes, it was a part of the much bigger package that the Assembly passed, almost unanimously. Obviously, our conference was wholeheartedly behind these initiatives, and we're looking forward to taking the next step come next January in 2019. Grand jury reform, bail reform, cash bail reform, all of these things, pretrial reform were part of the package. In my bill, grand jury reform, which would bring more transparency to the grand jury process, a level of openness which would enhance the level of trust that the citizenry might not have to the level in which we would think it is acceptable right now. So I'm looking forward to arguing that bill again next year and making sure that it gets passed again in our House and subsequently passed in the Senate.
And I would like to talk about the governor's Vital Brooklyn initiative. What's happening with that right now?
Well, right now we're in round 2. So round 1 was the introduction of the initiative. Round 2 was the issuing of the RFPs and the awarding of various organizations that were so designated by the legislature and the governor's office. And then round 3 would be another subsequent phase of rollouts of other activities that would be funded through the $1.4 billion that was allocated. And one of those is the allocation of $700 million to the One Brooklyn Hospital initiative, where we have a consolidation of several Brooklyn hospitals who will now be working in coordination with one another in an effort to bring about a level of sustainability and efficiency that we've not been able to practice, and as a result, it's been costly to not only the city, but to the state as well.
And there were some outstanding policy issues as well that we wanted to discuss, and one deals with marijuana reform, decriminalization of marijuana. Where are we right now in this process?
Well, I think in past shows we talked about, I sit as the vice chair of the steering committee, and the steering committee takes upon real controversial bills, and that's one of them, the legalization of marijuana and adult recreational use, how we transition from not just merely being a state where we provide medical marijuana use, but now how do we transition to a medical marijuana use state as well as a responsible adult recreational. And I emphasize responsible adult recreational use. It's not a recreational use for anyone who wants to partake, but recreational use for those who are responsible, those who can temper themselves, temper their desires and wants, while at the same time not criminalizing an activity that has been over criminalized in particular communities and segments of our state and city. So we're looking forward to dealing with all the issues that are related to that transition, whether it's labor issues, law enforcement issues, public safety, banking issues, transportation issues, and the like, because we understand that we have to address all those in one particular bill that's being headed up by our government operations chair, Assemblywoman Crystal People-Stokes from Buffalo. So we're looking forward to continuing this conversation between now and December, and have a operating and all-inclusive bill come beginning of session in 2019.
And also the issue of banning plastic bags.
Yeah.
That's been something people have been going back and forth about. How do you successfully do this, number one? And number two, where does the legislation stand?
Well, first thing, you got to always remain focused on the intent of the policy, and that is to decrease our carbon footprint, decrease the level of plastics and carcinogens we put into our ecosystem, and in an effort to preserve our ecosystem, in an effort to make sure that we are good citizens and that we're doing our part in preserving our natural institutions. So that's the first thing. We always have to remain constant. Two, what we don't also want to do, we don't want to become a burden on those who are less fortunate, who, if we decide to put a surcharge on plastic use, that it does not disproportionately impact one community over another. One community that can absorb the surcharge, while another community that can't absorb the surcharge. And then three, we just want to make sure this is also about behavioral modification. So for me, I've never carried, canvas bags and the like, reusable bags in my car until now. Now, do I bring them out consistently? No, but the first step is for me to start carrying them with me, so that when I do go to the store or I do go to grocery shopping, that they're available to me, and I remind myself to take them with me so that I don't have to use the plastic bags that are available to me at the supermarket currently. So we have to understand that we're about the ecosystem, our environment, behavioral modification, but we don't want to overtax and overburden and make this a punitive measure as well when it comes to people of lower socioeconomic status. So those are the things that we kind of, we understand is that our main tasks. And I think that the steering committee is doing all that they can to make sure that we keep that in mind. And Assemblyman Englebright's bill, I think, talks to creating a fund where we would funnel the fees and monies that will be collected to an environmental conservation initiative that would help us with other ways in which we can clean our ecosystem.
And I imagine these bills will be coming up next session, so
certainly
we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Assemblyman Walter Mosley, who represents the 57th Assembly District in Brooklyn. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.